Chapter 2, Hougomont by Victor Hugo from the book Les Misérables. Hougomont, this was a funereal spot, the beginning of the obstacle, the first resistance which that great woodcutter of Europe called Napoleon encountered at Waterloo, the first knot under the blows of his axe. It was a chateau, it is no longer anything but a farm. For the antiquary, Hougomont is Hougomont's. This manor was built by Hugo, sire of Sumrel, the same who endowed the sixth chaplaincy of the Abbey of Villiers. The traveler pushed open the door, elbowed an ancient calash under the porch, and entered the courtyard. The first thing which struck him in this paddock was a door of the 16th century, which here simulates an arcade, everything else having fallen prostrate around it. A monumental aspect often has its birth in ruin. In a wall near the arcade opens another arched door, of the time of Henry IV, permitting a glimpse of the trees of an orchard. Beside this door, a manure hole, some pickaxes, some shovels, some carts, an old well with its flagstone and its iron reel, a chicken jumping, and a turkey spreading its tail. A chapel surmounted by a small bell tower, a blossoming pear tree trained in espalier against the wall of the chapel. Behold the court, the conquest of which was one of Napoleon's dreams. This corner of earth, could he but have seized it, would, perhaps, have given him the world likewise. Chickens are scattering its dust abroad with their beaks. A growl is audible. It is a huge dog who shows his teeth and replaces the English. The English behaved admirably there. Cook's 4 companies of guards there held out for 7 hours against the fury of an army. Hougomont, viewed on the map, as a geometrical plan comprising buildings and enclosures, presents a sort of irregular rectangle, one angle of which is nicked out. It is this angle which contains the southern door, guarded by this wall, which commands it only a gun's length away. Hougomont has 2 doors, the southern door, that of the chateau, and the northern door belonging to the farm. Napoleon sent his brother Jerome against Hougomont. The divisions of Foy, Guillemot, and Bacalou hurled themselves against it. Nearly the entire corps of Reille was employed against it, and miscarried. Kellerman's balls were exhausted on this heroic section of wall. Baudouin's brigade was not strong enough to force Hougomont on the north, and the brigade of Soye could not do more than effect the beginning of a breach on the south, but without taking it. The farm buildings border the courtyard on the south. A bit of the north door, broken by the French, hangs suspended to the wall. It consists of 4 planks nailed to 2 crossbeams, on which the scars of the attack are visible. The northern door, which was beaten in by the French, and which has had a piece applied to it to replace the panel suspended on the wall, stands half open at the bottom of the paddock. It is cut squarely in the wall, built of stone below, of brick above, which closes in the courtyard on the north. It is a simple door for carts, such as exist in all farms, with the 2 large leaves made of rustic planks. Beyond lie the meadows. The dispute over this entrance was furious. For a long time, all sorts of imprints of bloody hands were visible on the doorposts. It was there that Baudouin was killed. The storm of the combat still lingers in this courtyard. Its horror is visible there. The confusion of the fray was petrified there. It lives and it dies there. It was only yesterday. The walls are in the death agony, the stones fall, the breaches cry aloud, the holes are wounds, the drooping, quivering trees seem to be making an effort to flee. This courtyard was more built up in 1815 than it is today. Buildings, which have since been pulled down, then formed redans and angles. The English barricaded themselves there, the French made their way in but could not stand their ground. Beside the chapel, one wing of the chateau, the only ruin now remaining of the manor of Hougomont, rises in a crumbling state, disemboweled, one might say. The chateau served for a dungeon, the chapel for a blockhouse. Their men exterminated each other. The French fired on from every point, from behind the walls, from the summits of the garrets, from the depths of the cellars, through all the casements, through all the air holes, through every crack in the stones, fetched faggots and set fire to walls and men. The reply to the grapeshot was a conflagration. In the ruined wing, through windows garnished with bars of iron, the dismantled chambers of the main building of brick are visible. The English guards were in ambush in these rooms. The spiral of the staircase, cracked from the ground floor to the very roof, appears like the inside of a broken shell. The staircase has 2 stories. The English, besieged on the staircase and massed on its upper steps, had cut off the lower steps. These consisted of large slabs of blue stone, which form a heap among the nettles. Half a score of steps still cling to the wall. On the first is cut the figure of a trident. These inaccessible steps are solid in their niches. All the rest resembles a jaw which has been denuded of its teeth. There are 2 old trees there. One is dead, The other is wounded at its base and is clothed with verdure in April. Since 1815, it has taken to growing through the staircase. A massacre took place in the chapel. The interior, which has recovered its calm, is singular. The Mass has not been said there since the carnage. Nevertheless, the altar has been left there. An altar of unpolished wood, placed against a background of rough-hewn stone. 4 whitewashed walls, a door opposite the altar, 2 small arched windows. Over the door a large wooden crucifix, below the crucifix a square air hole stopped up with a bundle of hay. On the ground in one corner, an old window frame with the glass all broken to pieces. Such is the chapel. Near the altar there is nailed up a wooden statue of Saint Anne, of the 15th century. The head of the infant Jesus has been carried off by a large ball. The French, who were masters of the chapel for a moment, and were then dislodged, set fire to it. The flames filled this building. It was a perfect furnace. The door was burned, the floor was burned, the wooden Christ was not burned. The fire preyed upon his feet, of which only the blackened stumps are now to be seen. Then it stopped. A miracle, according to the assertion of the people of the neighborhood. The infant Jesus, decapitated, was less fortunate than the Christ. The walls are covered with inscriptions. Near the feet of Christ this name is to be read, Henquinez. Then these others, Conde de Rio Mayer Marx y Marquesa de Almagro, Habana. There are French names with exclamation points, a sign of wrath. The wall was freshly whitewashed in 1849. The nations insulted each other there. It was at the door of this chapel that the corpse was picked up which held an axe in its hand. This corpse was Sub-Lieutenant Legros. On emerging from the chapel, a well is visible on the left. There are 2 in this courtyard. One inquires, why is there no bucket and pulley to this? It is because water is no longer drawn there. Why is water not drawn there? Because it is full of skeletons. The last person who drew water from the well was named Guillaume van Kilsum. He was a peasant who lived at Hougomont and was gardener there. On the 18th of June, 1815, his family fled and concealed themselves in the woods. The forest surrounding the Abbey of Villiers sheltered these unfortunate people who had been scattered abroad for many days and nights. There are at this day certain traces recognizable, such as old boles of burned trees, which mark the site of these poor bivouacs trembling in the depths of the thickets. Guillaume van Kilsum remained at Hougomont to guard the Shadow and concealed himself in the cellar. The English discovered him there. They tore him from his hiding place, and the combatants forced this frightened man to serve them by administering blows with the flats of their swords. They were thirsty. This Guillaume brought them water. It was from this well that he drew it. Many drank there their last draught. This well where drank so many of the dead was destined to die itself. After the engagement, they were in haste to bury the dead bodies. Death has a fashion of harassing victory, and she causes the pest to follow glory. The typhus is a concomitant of triumph. This well was deep, and it was turned into a sepulchre. 300 dead bodies were cast into it. With too much haste, perhaps. Were they all dead? Legend says they were not. It seems that on the night succeeding the interment, feeble voices were heard calling from the well. This well is isolated in the middle of the courtyard. 3 walls, part stone, part brick, and simulating a small, square tower, and folded like the leaves of a screen, surrounded on all sides. The 4th side is open. It is there that the water was drawn. The wall at the bottom has a sort of shapeless loophole, possibly the hole made by a shell. This little tower had a platform, of which only the beams remain. The iron supports of the well on the right form a cross. On leaning over, the eye is lost in a deep cylinder of brick which is filled with a heaped-up mass of shadows. The base of the walls all about the well is concealed in a growth of nettles. This well has not in front of it that large blue slab which forms the table for all wells in Belgium. The slab has here been replaced by a crossbeam, against which lean 5 or 6 shapeless fragments of knotty and petrified wood which resemble huge bones. There is no longer either pail, chain, or pulley, but there is still the stone basin which served the overflow. The rainwater collects there, and from time to time a bird of the neighboring forests comes thither to drink, and then flies away. One house in this ruin, the farmhouse, is still inhabited. The door of this house opens on the courtyard. Upon this door, beside a pretty Gothic lock plate, there is an iron handle with trefoils placed slanting. At the moment when the Hanoverian Lieutenant Wilde grasped this handle in order to take refuge in the farm, a French sapper hewed off his hand with an axe. The family who occupy the house had for their grandfather Guillaume van Kilsum, the old gardener, dead long since. A woman with gray hair said to us, "I was there, I was 3 years old. My sister, who was older, was terrified and wept. They carried us off to the woods. I went there in my mother's arms. We glued our ears to the earth to hear. I imitated the cannon and went baum, baum. A door opening from the courtyard on the left led into the orchard, so we were told. The orchard is terrible. It is in three parts, one might almost say in three acts. The first part is a garden, the second is an orchard, the third is a wood. These three parts have a common enclosure. On the side of the entrance, the buildings of the chateau and the farm, on the left, a hedge, on the right, a wall, and at the end, a wall. The wall on the right is of brick, the wall at the bottom is of stone. One enters the garden first. It slopes downwards, is planted with gooseberry bushes, choked with a wild growth of vegetation, and terminated by a monumental terrace of cut stone, with balustrade with a double curve. It was a seigneurial garden in the first French style which preceded Le Nôtre. Today it is ruins and briars. The pilasters are surmounted by globes which resemble cannonballs of stone. 43 balusters can still be counted on their sockets, the rest lie prostrate in the grass. Almost all bear scratches of bullets. One broken baluster is placed on the pediment like a fractured leg. It was in this garden, further down than the orchard, that 6 light infantry men of the first, having made their way thither, and being unable to escape, hunted down and caught like bears in their dens, accepted the combat with 2 Hanoverian companies, one of which was armed with carbines. The Hanoverians lined this balustrade and fired from above. The infantry men, replying from below, 6 against 200, intrepid and with no shelter save the currant bushes, took a quarter of an hour to die. One mounts a few steps and passes from the garden into the orchard, properly speaking. There, within the limits of those few square fathoms, 1,500 men fell in less than an hour. The wall seems ready to renew the combat. 38 loopholes, pierced by the English at irregular heights, are there still. In front of the 6th are placed 2 English tombs of granite. There are loopholes only in the south wall, as the principal attack came from that quarter. The wall is hidden on the outside by a tall hedge. The French came up, thinking that they had to deal only with a hedge, crossed it, and found the wall both an obstacle and an ambuscade, with the English guards behind it, the 38 loopholes firing at once a shower of grapeshot and balls, and Soy's brigade was broken against it. Thus Waterloo began. Nevertheless, the orchard was taken. As they had no ladders, the French scaled it with their nails. They fought hand to hand amid the trees. All this grass has been soaked in blood. A battalion of Nassau, 700 strong, was overwhelmed there. The outside of the wall, against which Kellerman's 2 batteries were trained, is gnawed by grapeshot. This orchard is sentient, like others, in the month of May. It has its buttercups and its daisies. The grass is tall there. The cart horses browse there. Cords of hair, on which linen is drying, traverse the spaces between the trees and force the passerby to bend his head. One walks over this uncultivated land, and one's foot dives into mole holes. In the middle of the grass, one observes an uprooted tree bole which lies there all verdant. Major Blackman leaned against it to die. Beneath a great tree in the neighborhood fell the German general, Duplat, descended from a French family, which fled on the revocation of the Edict of Nantes. An aged and falling apple tree leans far over to one side, its wound dressed with a bandage of straw and of clay loam. Nearly all the apple trees are falling with age. There is not one which has not had its bullet or its biskin. 6. The skeletons of dead trees abound in this orchard. Crows fly through their branches, and at the end of it is a wood full of violets. Baudouin killed, Foy wounded, conflagration, massacre, carnage, a rivulet formed of English blood, French blood, German blood mingled in fury, a well crammed with corpses. The regiment of Nassau and the regiment of Brunswick destroyed, Duplat killed, Blackman killed, the English guards mutilated, 20 French battalions. Besides the 40 from Reille's corps, decimated, 3,000 men in that hovel of Hougomont alone cut down, slashed to pieces, shot, burned with their throats cut. And all this so that a peasant can say today to the traveler, "Monsieur, give me 3 francs, and if you like, I will explain to you the affair of Waterloo."